picking up and following on to that about indicators, we have a question regarding the New York State Government Finance Officers Association is going to be holding a conference here, their annual conference here in the spring. And for the first time, they're going to be talking about strategic planning and performance measurement for local governments. Do you have any suggestions on how to present performance measures as part of the program for local governments?
Yeah, that's a toughie. Yeah, I'm thinking about, California's recent initiative. I think there's a bill that's going to require local governments to provide return on investment metrics for homelessness to be able to get grant money. So it's very important to define what you mean by that and, how you can make the case. So I think, we can probably all agree on, several metrics that would be important for any topical area. In the case of juvenile justice, for instance, recidivism. And then we have to have a good understanding, a good survey of how do the states measure that? And can we all circle around a particular measure or come to grips with it? Or will it take a couple of measures to figure that out? So it's not something that, one thing I learned in all my consulting is you can't go, drop something in the lap of the recipient and say, okay, we need this data and we need it this way. It's just not going to work like that. So you have to understand what are the biggest, issues for individual governments. And, I always would say, what are the top two things that you've got to deal with? And some would say, employee retention and retirement. Others would say, performance, and, it was all kinds of things. So yeah, I think you need to have an understanding of how are local governments measuring that policy issue or their return on investment, and then figuring out if there are several measures to offer up that could coalesce around that.
Yeah, I would say definitely, knowing New York State, I think one thing, or any local government in a state, one thing they would definitely need to pay attention to in implementing performance management or strategic planning involving performance is the issue of a capacity. Mm-hmm. The issue of a capacity. I think the fact that the Finance Officers Association are doing something, like in this field is already a very good indicator that people are paying attention to capacity building, right? Mm-hmm. So I think whatever it's being talked about in those training sessions need to make people realize that capacity is something that you have to consider in your process of designing a performance management system and thinking about developing performance measures, right? That's number one. And the other thing is set proper expectations. And I think many of the discussion that we have here is really centered around performance-informed budgeting and not about, based budgeting. And I think the potential of performance indicators, particularly those system-wide indicators for strategic planning, the potential of those indicators for strategic planning is tremendous. Mm-hmm. If tremendous. I think it drills down to one thing that people keeps talked about. Now, what's the impact of performance management? And one of the things they will say to you is it's a symbolic impact. And what that means is a government is paying attention to performance. And that is, that is the value of performance management in strategic planning, setting the tone, setting how important the performance it is for a government. And the last but not least, I will mention dialogue. This process cannot and should not be a top-down version. Like, oh, by the way, here's your measure and here's your standards. It never works that way. In our survey, you know, Catherine and I can attest to it. One of the indicators people say they're more likely to use performance indicators are they feel they have a voice in deciding them. So that kind of surprising in a sense that because a lot of people talking about like, you know, better measurement is more, talking about this from the perspective of technicality. But we argue a better performance is a performance indicator that has been talked about, has been communicated, has been negotiated. It's sort of a bottom-up process in addition to top-down. The dialogue between the upper layer and the agency operational personnel must be present for that indicator to work. So capacity building, looking at the impact of performance in strategic planning, and focus on dialogue. These are the three things that I think would be very, very important for local government taking on this gigantic task.